semi-news updates, I guess, for the Peterborough and Monadnock region. Carter Hammonds. Definitely, if you're just hopping in right now, as the stream is starting out, if you want to take a minute to follow us on Twitter, subscribe to us on YouTube, hit the little button down there, hit the bell for notifications, and head up to our Patreon. You can support us there. Makes a huge difference for us. Keeps this whole thing going, and you know that really matters. It really matters a lot to have that kind of thing popping off. So yeah, let's see, this week things are a little all over the place. We've got the whole reopen thing happening, which is tumultuous to say the least. We'll start things off today just by going over the town dispatch that they've been keeping up with lately, which has been great. I mean, like, really great. Like, it's super good. Sorry, I just gotta fix the mic there. So at any rate, yeah, we'll just I guess we'll just swing right over onto that. Here's the page. So basically, updates from the town are more or less construction projects continue on, more or less like nothing's happening, which is good that our infrastructure stuff is still moving along, that we're sort of, this particular community here isn't really getting super slammed yet with the really negative effects of this. I mean, like, I'm hearing about how you can't get chicken in Massachusetts right now, from family members. So I think, yeah, it's pretty bad out there right now, and we actually have a pretty stable and supply chain, and they tend to be much shorter here. So, and there's actually an article in the Ledger that came out about how well local farmers have been doing, and they're hitting full staff, and it's getting intense. So that's great news. Like, that's absolutely something that, regardless of whether or not there's a pandemic happening, we want to see that like, that's only good for everybody. That's it. So at any rate, school education programs are going to continue on through the summer. They're just going to sort of keep working with remote learning, keep that moving forward, and we'll have some more updates on that as things develop. But for right now, it's basically just, it's, yeah, I haven't had the time this week to dive too deep into that, because I'm going to go over a bunch of just different stuff. So, hopefully I can get back to it a little later. But again, like, I don't have a squad of people helping me dig through these headlines, or like have great talking points on everything. So each week that I do this, there's only so many things that I can kind of like dig into. And I've been trying super duper hard to not just like I have to fight every inclination to want to just talk about like juicy, gossipy, funny stuff. And it's not helpful, for anybody. And I don't think anybody really wants that. So it's like, I got to check myself. But at any rate, yeah. So, we are sort of looking at the opening up procedures here in town, and that's actually going to be the sort of the first thing that gets focused on here. We did have a select board meeting that occurred on Zoom on Facebook, so you can go check out the whole meeting there. I'm going to show part of it today on this stream, and just kind of like discuss the discussion a little bit, maybe just have some sort of dissemination on it. It can be good to just sort of talk it out and sort of see where everybody's coming from, or where that is. So yeah, so we'll go over that, and then also after that, I realized that it's been a long time, like probably about a year now, I want to say, since I've done like a deeper piece on specific legislation that's up now. Something for everybody to keep in mind is that right now, everything is absolutely shut down. And if you go to the state website, I mean, there's no more calls for any, like, House session or Senate. Like, everything is completely done right now. And so, there's not much moving on it at the moment, but that doesn't mean that we aren't going to have to deal with the repercussions and see this, like all this stuff is going to play out anyway. So we might as well talk about it now and have a look at it while we have some time too. And it's like, it's easy enough to go on and just sort of look at the whole list and like pick random things. And I guess I kind of did that, but I tried to select some things that were going to be descriptive of stuff that we deal with here. Now, what I will say is that there's a lot of just like, if you go and look at the actual website, it's really just a lot of the laws that go through are just about like managing specific things or making sure that permitting is in place, and it's not grotesquely unnecessary either. Most of it is pretty just like standard, like, oh yeah, we realized that we needed something to describe this because we ran into an error, we didn't have a law that addressed it, so we got to do that now. Okay, cool. Like, that's most of it. I guess, like, I know that there are a lot of contentious debates and discussions around certain topics that just like, for a lot of people, it's kind of like, well, why do we get so stressed out about that? Like, what's the point there? So I wanted to, like, I know it's like it edges on hot button, but I think it's good to sort of like try and have an ideological examination of some of these policies in their inherent existence and what they do, and like what, how we're as a state relating to them, and therefore what we can expect to see. So it's like, if I can, I'd like to try and just pull back the veil on some of those things. So that's going to be the next portion. But, I just, so that I'm open about what's going on today's episode. Yeah. Excuse me, folks. Sorry. I do not have anything. Don't worry. It's just like season changing has been really messing with me lately. So at any rate, moving on, they're doing seasonal flushing of fire hydrants. So that's happening. Pete Throop has left. Karen Hatcher has already started in on half of the role that he filled. That gets talked about in the select board meetings. So if anybody wants to catch up on some of that, you can go see it there. Yeah, that's been positive. So at any rate, basically we're just saying thanks to Pete for doing his thing and contributing his time to the town. The library is moving over to their new location, which is in the Monadnock Plaza, so in the old Radio Shack location over there near Pearl and Bantam. And that's a temporary thing. I mean, I guess with COVID-19, it kind of reduces the concern about them needing a ton of space, and not a lot of people are going to the library right now anyways. It's mostly just remote stuff. So at least there's that. Here, let me get that back up. So yep, got a lot of virtual programs. There was a bit of noise about Cunningham being closed. It looks like the rec department is working to deal with it, but I don't know I just kind of I've been trying to keep myself as disincorporated from Facebook as I possibly can, because it's just a nightmare website, and it's a lot of cacophony. So I almost rely on people letting me know when something happens there now, because I just like I'm trying really hard to just not look at it. But I did notice that there was a whole thing about how there was vandalism and people overcrowding, and so I'm not sure what is up with that, but I mean, for anybody who just knows, there's usually a warning that comes out around this time of year anyways, which is be careful jumping into the water because it's still freezing. So I don't know why everyone forgot about that warning and why everyone but okay, let's just hope that we can all get it together in that sense. So burn permits, for anybody who's looking for a burn permit, you can get those online now. And apparently, again, like with a lot of other things, we're seeing an increased amount of engagement from people to actually reaching out and doing it now that they don't have to go to the place. It's like they don't have to go to the fire station or wherever they would have to go to get something done. Just like you're seeing a lot more people show up and watch select board meetings online now, as opposed to the amount of people that would show up in the room or tune in on the Ustream. Like obviously the Ustream isn't really any different than Facebook, except the platform accessibility. But I think that's exactly the point, is that, for a lot of folks, it's definitely easier. Sorry if there's any rustling. My dog's eating a bone right now. It's just, it's a more accessible platform for people to get at that information, that resource. So this is what was included in the weekly dispatch, and I think that's, for anybody that's not catching up with this, like I know that I've been really slacking on getting links up in the descriptions of the videos lately, and that's been super duper on me. I got to get that together a bit more. But I will try and, again, just get a link to this. Obviously, if I were to show you the URL, it's a pretty big mess of things, but it's, again, just through the town of Peterborough.com if you're looking for updates on this town specifically. And they're doing a good job. Or if you're from a different town, you're looking for a model of something that works. I will say that this community has been pretty reasonable in dealing with its problems and getting through the crisis as it is. So, yeah, it's good stuff. Anyways, my weird falsetto yas. At any rate, might as well just hop over now to the actual video of the Zoom meeting. And what I'm gonna do is there's a lot of sort of preliminary stuff, and Bill Taylor was dealing with a sort of like weird, not great connection at the townhouse, so he'd pop in with video for a minute and then pop out, and his audio was pretty crackly. So it was a little bit whatever there, but generally speaking, what's happened before this in the conversation is they've talked about the money that they've received from the state, and they make a motion to accept that, and then they start talking about the reopening plan. And as they're doing this, they're taking live comments from Facebook. So what I will do is I'm just going to try and I'd like to get as much of the side stuff out of the way here as I possibly can. Okay, cool. I think we're good. Alrighty, so we'll put this up on the screen for now, and so right here they're starting out with some questions. So we'll just go from here, and when I need to, I'll pause it and chime in, and we'll go over stuff that they're discussing. So let's get into it.
Can merchants put a table outdoors with with merchandise for display, or is this order for the 18th only for restaurants and them getting outside with seating?
Sorry, almost forgot to unmute. So the guidelines so the outdoor seating is specifically for restaurants,
Mhm.
and so what the outdoor seating excuse me, what the guideline for restaurants does is it moves you from inside to outside. And as Karen mentioned, there's some pretty specific guidelines. For example, the tables have to be arranged so that all patrons and servers are at least 6 feet apart. Tables can't have any more than 6 people at them. So when it comes to a business, I don't think anything. I mean, I'll use Hubert's for example. I mean, Hubert's routinely puts carts out on the sidewalk. You know, carriages out. You know, having wares, as does Dollar General when they have stuff for sale. So I don't see why anything would prevent a retail. But again, the guidelines for the non-essential businesses are pretty clearly outlined in those documents through the governor's reopening task force, and those are actually available. The link to those is available in either through searching, just search online, New Hampshire Stay at Home 2.0, or the this week's weekly dispatch. I have those links directly in the EMS emergency management section.
Great. Okay, good. And then there's a follow-up question from Stephanie Hurley. Are workers in retail stores or restaurants required to wear masks? Many weren't as of yesterday.
So when it goes into effect, they are, and I apologize for not having the date in front of me, but yes, and when it goes in, essentially any worker in a essential or non-essential business will be required to have the face mask on whenever they're in a situation where they cannot social distance. So if you're in some place where it's you alone in manufacturing space and nobody else, you're not required to. But if there's any place where you cannot social distance, which is accepted to be 6 feet from other folks, then you have to have a cloth mask.
I think it's May 11th, Chief, for
May
the
11th,
retail.
okay.
Yeah.
Man, that is not going to go over well.
So it
like,
would be
that is
it would
not
behoove
going to go over
us
well with people.
as customers to wear masks as well to protect the workers and back and forth and so forth, right? That we're all kind of in this together, and we don't want to end up killing someone inadvertently, right?
Right. That is, again, that goes back to the guidance that's coming out from CDC and from the State Department, State Department of Public Health Services, is that individuals wear masks when out in public when they can't social distance to prevent the potential spread of the disease.
Okay, I'm going to pause that really quick. So just like something to like consider here. And I mean, I've said this like so many times on here that like this is wearing masks and social distancing and all this stuff. Like when people say, essentially you got like on screen 5 in the chat, 6 authoritative figures in a local government basically saying, yeah, you need to, we want you to do these things. They are trying so hard, and I would say effectively, to communicate that they're not demanding you or policing you into doing this. It's a matter of just like care about the people around you, have some compassion. Okay. And I mean, it's like a meeting like this, like where they can't, like, they're not gonna get overly, for a number of reasons, they're not gonna get overly political. One, because they don't want to piss anybody off. Two, because I think most of the people actually they all just agree on this. Like, there's not really, like, at this point, the idea of you need to do these things is not something that these people don't all have. They're not like on different pages about. So something that we can all be pleased with is at least that we have some cohesion here. Okay. And it's also, they're not trying to tell you what to do either. Like, they all respect everybody's individual right to be who they are. They're just kindly asking you to please don't be that person that just disregards others for your own fear of being told what to do. So at any rate, we'll continue here.
So who's gonna, to use the word police, these a retail establishment and their employees that are required to wear these masks?
So this is it's a public health rule, if you will. So it's public health's job to sort of to investigate these complaints. I mean, I don't think anybody will be walking around inspecting, but again, as you mentioned, we're in this together. So if individuals have a concern about this, the same as they would about any other rule or regulation not being followed or enforced by any outlet, then they should feel free to either call. There's a state number you can call for clarification and questioning, and they will reach right out to us with any follow-up or complaints that need to be follow up, or feel free to contact me, either by email or phone, and we can certainly follow up. What I can tell you for things around this, both from my perspective and Tim Hurley, he's on the building side, is.
And something I want to hop in on here too is that what Chief is saying is actually consistent with something else that he had said to me at a different point in time when I was working on another story, which I feel terrible that I still haven't talked about it yet. Probably because I'm not quite there and COVID changed everything. But essentially, Chief really pointed out to me at one point in a conversation that so much of this kind of stuff really does rely on people just reporting it to the proper authority. And his point about it's a public health issue. So you would report it the same way you would report unsanitary health conditions, you know what I mean? Or you'd report a restaurant for being not up to code. It's the same type of thing. It all falls under that same umbrella. If you're having trouble with it, obviously he points out you can contact him. He'll help you get in touch with the right people. But it's, people act like this is a whole big thing. This is nothing new. And honestly, we should, in a way, all be surprised that this wasn't just part and parcel of how we dealt with health code with things like the flu or any other regular viral risk or of infection, seasonal stuff. You know what I mean? This is the idea that in this country we send our service workers, our food service workers, in and do these jobs when they're bringing, they're cooking food, they're preparing it, they're bringing it to your table, and these people so often have to go into work sick because they live paycheck to paycheck, and to take even a day off could be the difference between them making or not making rent. And when that's the case, it's this weird blind eye that we have turned to food safety, and it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So for anybody to get really riled up and be no offense, but obviously to slam on your Karens who are coming out and I really like Karen Hatcher personally, so I don't want to use it in the derogatory term against her, but I know what people mean when they say the word. Obviously there's the definition is pretty clear at this point. So I don't agree with just overly policing folks. I think it's fine if you disagree with somebody and you're annoyed with how they're handling things. That's fine. You can have your opinion and do that and keep it, to yourself, and that's your opinion. You're allowed to have it. Know that sharing it often won't help. So I don't know. Just I guess what I'm trying to say is it's so utterly not worth getting upset about it. At all. There's literally no reason to be upset about people calling in and saying, hey, this restaurant isn't meeting their outdoor distancing requirements between tables or what have you, and which is something that they'll get into here in a minute. that's only more outrageous if we as a culture are egging it on. And it's important to recognize that criticizing something too much is going to make it worse. And I wish that like libertarian right-winger people would keep that in mind, that like if they hate this like crusade, like super liberal, like warrior thing that they don't like, then stop ragging on it, because you're just adding fuel. Like every time that you attack that, you're empowering those folks to be more vociferous and not think themselves through a little bit more and balance what they're saying so that it comes out the way they wish that it did, until they feel attacked. I mean, I don't know. This is probably an opinion that I could get slammed myself for having, but I don't know. I just don't see it as helpful. And much the same way I think, like, people get attacked for, like, oh, you're giving, it's much the same way as giving someone a like, by talking about somebody that you don't like, you're actually giving them a platform, so you're helping them, or it's like akin to the idea of letting someone rent space in your head. Like, just don't do it, because you're just giving them more power. And the thing to understand is that hurts, actually, like that rationale, that like overreaction to trying to like protect and police things, it hurts rational measures and like reasonable, calculated thinking about how to deal with pandemic measures, which, like, I think there's a lot of like, it's like they're taking what would be the truth and then making it worse than it is. And it's like you're starting with a kernel of decency, but we're also getting into a world that's just not right. And it's too far beyond the pale. So I think, just stuff to consider. That's really all I have to say about it at that point. So at any rate, we'll keep rolling on this.
Most of the time when folks are not following guidelines, it's because they aren't aware of the guidelines. There are very few people out there that are acting maliciously. So when you have the conversation with them and educate them about the rules and the regulations, that usually goes a long way. And that is one of the purposes of, us having Scott as the fire inspector out there to, literally he is going to door to every retail outlet in the town of Peterborough to make sure that those folks understand what the new guidelines are and provide them any assistance in implementing those guidelines.
That's great. That's great. And of course, the town of Peterborough has done a great job and so far, and we've been lucky, and we'd like to keep that streak going, correct? Karen, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I just want to say that, while this emergency order 40 allows some reopening and some loosening of the guidelines, what Chief said right at the beginning is that June is going to be our worst month. Right. So, so both of those things are true. We want to reopen, right? And we want to be together. We want to see people out in public again. But at the same time, we have to be more vigilant with our masks and with our social distancing and not let down, because the numbers are growing. And this is going to be, from everything we're reading and seeing, this is going to be many waves of this kind of coming and then going away and then coming again and going away. So the better we are at just getting into the habit of wearing.
Quick tidbit right here. On a microbiological scale, this is expectedly, like, in scientific terms, going to affect us for 18 to 24 months. So Karen's right that anything that anybody says to the contrary is just not rooted in a scientific understanding of our current problems. So I really cannot stress enough that is not fear-mongering. That's taking the problem seriously. Okay. Yeah, we'll just I don't have anything else on that one, really. I really, that's, you got to drive that point home. It's absurd.
The masks when we're out and following the rules and not getting impatient, I guess. And I think then we're going to do well all the way through. But I did have a question for Chief. If people are working in the public, in the testing, I saw that the testing has been increased to somewhere around 1,500 tests a day. That can be done 1,000 to 1,500 a day. Is it
something else, just a tidbit here. As of right now, as of today, there's actually clips of Sununu talking about, and actually maybe it's worth hopping back because I'm pretty sure he goes over it like pretty much at the very beginning of the video. We'll just do this really fast. Let's see here. Here we go.
Certain parts of the state will continue to place an emphasis on testing. We always talk about what an important tool testing can be, and having increased capacity and a more specific driven goal in terms of what we want to do with testing, both within the general population, how we deal with it within long-term care facilities, how we use it with our hospitals, as we start expanding with operational procedures and surgeries. It's all going to be a very important part of the puzzle. We have our mobile testing teams. We have remote access sites across the state for those who may not live close by to a hospital or a healthcare facility. And we have our fixed locations, as well as all the locations at the convenient MD facilities, 11 convenient MD facilities across the state, and locations that are currently doing testing as well. We've opened up testing to Granite Staters by urging doctors to recommend a COVID-19 test to anyone displaying symptoms. And today we're announcing that we are going to further expand this effort by setting up an online web portal to allow for Granite Staters to sign up and reserve a test in advance by going online. Tomorrow morning, we will put a link on the nh.gov homepage that will allow anyone in the state to sign up for a test. In order to sign up for a test, you must simply self-attest that you have one of the COVID-19 symptoms, which could include fever, chills, repeated shaking with chills, muscle pain, headache, sore throat, or a loss of taste or smell.
Okay.
And you can request a test if you are a healthcare worker, 60 years old or more, with someone with chronic lung disease, or moderate to severe asthma, serious heart conditions, someone that might be immunocompromised, obesity, diabetes, chronic kidney disease, or liver disease. So we've tried to add a whole plethora of options and potential ailments or symptoms that someone might have to make sure that they have access to a test. Expanding our testing capacity in this way is going to be, I think, a very important tool as we go forward. The portal will allow for anyone to simply go online, select from one of the 5 remote fixed sites we've established in Claremont, Tamworth, Rochester, Plymouth, and Lancaster, and choose a time and day of the week that they want to come in and have their test done. Anyone, regardless of their financial or insurance status, will be able to receive a test. And again, I think it's a great opportunity for our citizens and our state to be very refined as we take our next steps forward. Another area where we're working hard to address is childcare. We've got a lot of questions.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, look, like, it's really nice that they're opening this up to people who would be considered sort of like at risk. Not as nice is just how, like it's reserving a test. Like, you're not getting a test, you're reserving a test. So he's using language that's going to let there be a decent amount of space for separation of possibility. And I could pan out the other way. It could all be okay. But it's a cautious measure on his part. The point being, there is movement at the very least to increase testing. And so that's sort of just, not to get too far off the topic of this, but at any rate, take a little little detour there.
Still that you have to have some kind of symptom or concern that you get a test? Or is it now, if you're interacting with the public and you're out, you have a concern because your job takes you out into the public, that you could get a test to just see if you've had it already, if you have antibodies? What's going on around that?
So here's my understanding. And so currently the testing for if you are infected is only done with people who are symptomatic, because again, if you're not symptomatic, you may not have it. They don't want to, impact that capacity.
Again,
to give
that's
tests.
still tracking
There
with what
is
we
some
just heard.
discussion starting around the antibody tests and where that is going to go. I don't know where that is in the state of New Hampshire. The Department of Public Health is still looking at and using the guidelines where the testing starts with your physician, and your primary care physician will determine whether or not you need to be tested or not. And that not only is based on symptoms, but it's also based upon your impact and other factors that are going into that. So not everybody who is symptomatic will necessarily get tested. So again, that's why they're looking to really start with the primary care physician as the person to manage that testing and do that.
Okay, thank you.
We had another question come in regarding the spacing at potential restaurant outdoor seating
Here we go.
from Lisa Hall Sullivan. It's our understanding, according to the AG's office, tables need to be 13 feet apart because the server has to be 6 feet away from a table, either front or back. So the way it is written is deceiving. Can someone clarify this? Chief?
Oh, so it's correct. Yeah. You
That's
need to
correct.
have the minimum of 6 feet of space between everybody. So a server should be able to stand between two tables, take an order, and also be 6 feet away from the table behind them.
AKA, there's got to be
Right.
12 feet of distance between every
Okay.
table at every
Can I chime
point.
in on this for a second?
Yeah, please.
In terms of restaurants where they don't currently have outdoor seating, but could expand, what I would suggest is that if it's possible, if we make like a blanket order for restaurants to be able to expand to outside, to add a couple of tables where it's, safe. Like, for instance, outdoor seating, maybe they could pop up around places like Dunkin' Donuts. There's a bunch of restaurants that aren't right in the center of town and don't already have outdoor seating. So thinking of them, like in the plaza aside, where the Pearl is, Bantam, the Yen Yen, and Jimmy Tan at Kogetsu has some outdoor seating, but they could expand outside pretty safely. Restaurants like Brady's could go out into the back parking lot along the sidewalk in the front, so long as they have temporary fencing. So I'm suggesting so that they can go to the state with something in their hands and say, yes, outdoor seating has been approved for my restaurant. Then they need to get approval from the state, is what is my understanding. So if we could do make a motion to make a blanket order, say through the fall, so that any restaurant that has a safe place to extend their outdoor seating or to add outdoor seating would be allowed by us without having to go through the code office and all those other steps. If we could do something right now to allow it so that they can go to the state and say it's been approved by my town, can I do that?
Bill, it's a little more complicated than that.
I'm sorry. I like that. That's I'll obviously let this keep playing, but that's just a funny moment to me. I respect what Bill's saying. You know what I mean? Like, I respect that he's like really fighting for the businesses that are struggling right now. And I respect that he's just like, he probably feels like he needs to do something, like he's the guy in power. But as they point, like, it's just not that simple. Like, we may really like our the people in charge of our town, but they really, like, they are limited in their ability to seriously impact change beyond what's within their domain. There's That's just, you know, and this is outside of that. This has to do with state stuff. And, you know, at that point, I would say, y'all business owners need to talk to you boy Sununu and sort that out. Not to say that he is the boy of all business owners, but I certainly know several that he's not. But you know, that's when it comes to restaurants, I mean, again, it's a public safety issue, and like, I guess it in a lot of ways, what this really comes down to is like, what matters more to you, economics or safety? Like, that's it. Like, that's the bottom line here. And I think, you know, it's funny to me because, like, and I don't want to say that I don't think necessarily the bill is like, this is what Bill is getting at, because I've certainly never put words in his mouth about it, but I do kind of like, I don't know, it's like, it's all very much so part of the same problem. You know, it comes back to this, like, what matters more, you know, is if, you know, if I feel like to properly care about economics right now, you need to care about safety first. That's just my opinion. And I guess I just like, I think about it in terms of like, okay, if we want to think about like a free market solution, right? You want to think about it in terms of free market, like the free market decides if it, you know, if a business sucks, it goes under, right? What I wonder is why we're not considering that this is part of a reaction of, like, this is a part of a free market reaction to a certain thing. Now, like, what it shows you is that, right, if a free market is an organism, right? Well, let's consider for a moment that that organism can become sick. You know, it's if it's a living, breathing thing, as so many like to consider it, it's a wild ecosystem, it's a jungle, it's got a, you know, biomes like that can die really easily. They can become infected with certain maladies that tear them down, and I don't know why we would consider an economic ecosystem to be any different, right? So what has happened essentially is that it has become sick. It has become sick with a number of different things over the course of many years, and a whole lot of really bad policy. But essentially, an illness came along that it can't sustain. And what happens in that situation? Well, you see a lot of casualties. You see a lot of destruction in the wake of that. And for anybody who thought that we weren't going to lose businesses that we care about through this, like, I'm not saying I'm okay with it, okay? And I'm not saying that I'm happy about it, right? I don't want it to happen. I don't want it to be this case. But the idea that we will simply be able to just make it work for every business everywhere and get through this, and like the economy is more like, if you're going to put the existing infrastructure ahead of public safety, you are inherently contradicting the natures of a free market argument in a way. Like, that's just my personal belief, but like, seriously, I want folks to try to consider it in that context, that this is about survival of the fittest, and this is yet another test in that context. If you want to use that lens, like, let's accept that straw man for a minute. Let's accept it and try and really deal with it. And frankly, I don't have an alternate conclusion to reach beyond that. So it's just sort of like, it's just something that I think is worth further examination, or at the very least to take it all the way to its logical conclusion, because I don't know what you do otherwise, really. Like, so anyways, and again, I don't think, I don't think that Bill Taylor is trying to hint at any of these things, but I see what he's saying as a cool opportunity to bring up this discussion and talk about this dynamic, because I talk a lot about how people need to reframe the discussion surrounding topics like this. And this is the way that you reframe that discussion. This is how you achieve that, is by trying to understand it in that, like, how do I understand the same thing in the opposite way? Like, where does, what's the reflection of it that shows me more or less the same image or the same thing in the silhouette? So at any rate, I'm going to get back into this and we'll continue this conversation, which gets a little funny right now. So here we go.
There's actually a lot of factors involved, including the Liquor Commission for service of alcohol and whatnot, which is why we're taking steps to use the minor site plan review process, which doesn't require a public meeting, but it gets all of the pertinent officials into the room at the same time so that they can review applications for outdoor seating or expanded outdoor seating all at the same time. That'll expedite the process. We're putting all of that into, we actually already had our first meeting about that this week. It's a meeting that can be called by the chair of the planning board. That chair right now is Ivy Van, and we're going to be administering all that through the Office of Community Development. So any restaurant owner who is interested in expanding service to outside location can get in touch with the Office of Community Development.
And I spoke to Ivy. They had a meeting to go over this process. Again, they haven't had anything come through yet, but it is, as they will go on to explain, it's done because it's a much quicker way to deal with this. So, yeah, we'll just keep rolling.
Development with Laura or Tim Herlihy, and they'll get that process moving. But there are a few factors involved. So in every restaurant has a different situation. They've got a different location. They have different resources or different limitations on their site. So they kind of all have to be done one by one as opposed to a blanket. But the application's really not terribly difficult.
And this is consistent with the idea that every floor plan is literally different and everybody has different size tables, and like, every business owner is going to have to individually figure out exactly what's going to work for them and how much of their capacity they're going to be able to meet and all this. And then they have to do a cost benefit analysis on whether or not those tables are going to generate enough revenue for them to be open and stay staffed during that period of time and all that. So it's like, look, there's a lot of variables to this. And that's why I say that, like, if you're not ready to accept that there's potentially, like, you're going to see loss of certain businesses over this. And, like, I think it's likely that, businesses that make a huge difference in our community or are a big part of our community will likely get, they'll see whatever bump in patronage that they need to see, as well as probably getting resources that, both state and community resources. I think we as a community will probably keep stuff like that going. Locations that do less contribution will probably most likely rely on out of state resources, federal resources if they're able to get them, or they're just not going to keep going. And that's just how that's going to be. And everybody's got to get comfortable with that. That's that.
going to try to keep it as easy and moving as fast as possible so that the restaurants can get open and get serving, and we can all start eating out again.
That's great. And of course, and the people that work at these restaurants can get back to work too. Yeah, thanks for that, Nicole. That's an important thing. I was going to ask, as Bill was mentioning, that I'd be for that sort of thing, but I was just asked about the Liquor Commission and how that would work if there was outdoor seating and how people could be possibly served. And that is a difficult hurdle to jump. But I'm glad you guys are already on it. That's great step.
There's also the concern of if a restaurant currently is only doing takeout, and they do add seating outside, then the restrooms have to be available, and those have to be cleaned in a particular way with particular supplies. So that adds another burden. So there's an economic piece of this that each restaurant owner is going to need to look at to say, what does it cost me to be able to have those 4 or 5 tables because of the spacing, to bring staff back, to be able to then run my restaurant and make sure the bathrooms are cleaned and that the facilities are managed. So I think that there's a lot that goes into each restaurant owner making this decision for themselves and looking at each location from both the safety aspect as well as the business case. So we're going to hopefully help them to work themselves all the way through that.
Great.
All of this is
Are we sure that there's every step that is added at this point, and I realize that it has to go by the rules, of course, but every step that's added is more time that they're going to have to wait, and by the time they get an approval from the town and then they have to go to the state and the Liquor Commission, it's going to be well beyond the time that they could have opened. So what I'm saying is, if we do something to expand temporary outdoor seating, I don't know why we can't do it. I mean, we're the selectmen. We can do whatever we want, whenever we want.
Here's the thing, they can. That's already good.
I mean, there's a lot of these restaurants aren't going to make it if they don't have outdoor seating available. And I've been told that by a couple of different ones, that if we don't do something so that they have outdoor seating availability, because by the time they go through all the steps to get approvals through the state, and I'm surprised actually the governor hasn't come out with something on this, and if he hasn't, hopefully he's watching tonight and he hears this, but
Doubtful.
we really need to do whatever we can to avoid a lengthy process, is what I'm saying.
absolutely.
If I can just chime in for 1 second, Bill. So the restaurant opening is until the 18th. So that's, there is almost 2 weeks to get that through. As for the lengthy process,
Bit less than that now, but yeah.
The state doesn't really have a lengthy process. The state has allowed restaurants who have an existing liquor license to extend that liquor license outside by notifying them. They have a dedicated email address for that, where all the restaurant has to do is email the State Liquor Commission and say, hey, we're extending to outside. Where it comes into the town side is making sure that what this is doing does not do one of two things. One, endanger public safety, so that the individuals that are participating or the others. And the other part is, as Karen indicated, there are a lot of, it's like the free money that we're all getting from the CARES Act. There are strings attached to every.
No such thing as free money. Sorry. Love Chief Walker. No such thing as free money. This is not free money. We all paid that money in taxes a while ago. Okay? Friendly reminder. We are getting our money back. Okay? This is not free money. This is our money that we gave to the government to hold on to make sure that we're good in situations like this. Strings attached are making sure that we don't spend it like idiots, which is a fine thing to do. Because the whole point is about well-being, because we live in a civilized society where we determine that certain things are things that we need, like clean water or electricity. Okay, roads, there's all this stuff that we've decided, we need all these things. These work for us. They help us be better than just monkeys in loincloths or whatever the hell you want to. I don't know what, like, I'm sorry. I like Chief Walker and all this, but when I hear the words free money, I get just outraged, because like that's our money. Like, we are getting it back. That is, in my opinion, everybody should be cool with this, because it's like getting your taxes back. Like, and I mean, at least like this is what taxes are for. Like, what about all the free money that we just give to the military every single year? Like, what about that? What about all the free money that we do in defense spending or in tax cuts for wealthy people? Like, I'm sorry, I don't mean to rip in this, but like, dude, just sorry. Okay, I'm going to let it roll on, but I just want to caveat, there's no such thing as free money. An oxymoron.
A bit of it. So it's not as simple as you can go outside. There are other things. And I think that, Karen, with what, you've been 2 days at part-time, so 12 hours on the job, is doing a really good job with the reaching out and getting this. And I think we're listening to some of the calls, even 2 days into it, we're pretty far out ahead of it. I would just encourage the restaurant owners to give us that day or two to reach out to all of them. If, and I'll put Karen out there. If they don't hear from us by the end of the week, absolutely get in touch with us. We're not going to do anything to impede it. We just have to make sure that it's the same for everybody and it's safe for those patrons and those employees. That's
Great
really
points. Yeah, thank you, Chief. All right. Any further discussion regarding this? It's not the last we'll hear of it or last we'll discuss it, but it's good to hear everybody's working towards the same goal, really, right? Safety,
Right.
and get everybody back working and eating and all that stuff. All right, next up we'll
I'm going to
have
let this roll. Rod's going to
Town
talk a little bit
Administrator
more
Rodney
about it too.
Bartlett discussing the bridge project and library project update. Hi, Rodney.
You're muted, Rodney.
You got on mute.
Gotta love it. Gotta love the Zoom meeting.
Still talking.
How's
There we go.
that? All right.
Better.
Just one more point on the process we've decided for the outdoor patios, dining patios. The reason we chose the minor site plan review committee to handle that, their meetings can be called with a 24-hour notice. And those applications will be submitted downstairs to Laura and Tim Herlihy, shared with all of us that same day. So we think we're going to expedite the process, and clearly the State Liquor Commission simply setting up a dedicated email address and only asking for notification. I think that makes it pretty quick. Working through all the health, safety, and other issues will be the true hurdles on those. Just as one more note.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's sort of the big takeaway is that despite what people may think, this is not a big, lengthy process right now. It's nobody's being prevented from doing their thing. You just have to make sure you're following the standards, which did come out in the stay-at-home 2.0 order and guidance on reopenings. So, people just need to take a look at that. As far as, speaking with Ivy, she said, she's working up, some more details and guidelines for people so that we can have one in town. And she's waiting for the Liquor Commission on that one. So again, it's like this is all relying on a state entity and our state representative, senators, like everybody to the selectmen, to the people working in the towns. They're doing everything they can, but this is up to a different government entity. And I think it's just important that we all remember that's what's going on there. And that we should not get too upset with the people in charge of our town right now about this, because there's only so much that they can do. Okay. Wow. I spent like an hour going off on that and I didn't mean to. Jeez. Whew. Okay. Well, I guess that means I'll just be condensing this more. And I think we could probably get it done. So, yeah, for this next bit, I wanted to talk about just some bills that are in the House now. Obviously, right now, everything's held up, nothing's going through. So this stuff is sort of like the state legislature's in limbo. It's fine. But I wanted to take a minute to talk about some bills that are just around that we can discuss that I thought were a good example. So, alrighty. First off, I want to talk about a bill called House Bill 1268. Okay. Now, in a sense, right now, I'll put it up. 1268 is it's there was a motion adopted that it's inexpedient to legislate. So that's like, in many ways, that's functionally like that's a functionally dead bill. Like, it's not going anywhere. Like, this isn't. So what? It's kind of like a drag in a way. Look into it further. It actually more so, the reason it's functionally dead more so has to do with actually one of the people who had sponsored the bill had to remove it due to a personal thing, especially just right around the time of COVID, having to deal with flu infection separately, and that's on State House video. She's talking about that. Essentially, and it's not entirely clear why that was the case. There was a committee report saying that it's not expedient to legislate, and it sounds like they were working on something, or she was trying to work out a way to get it through the, let's see, which committee was... referred to Education House Journal, public hearing, executive session. So looks like a committee chair came along and said that they didn't want to push this through. They were trying to continue to make it go, and it wasn't happening. It's a shame, because this bill is pretty decent, man. What this bill wants to do is essentially it's just to establish a committee too. Like, it's not even saying that they want to make any specific legislation. They just want to establish a committee to look into student loan forgiveness on the basis of volunteer work, including serving the legislature. So they specifically let's try and make this a little bit bigger here so that people don't have to. I always want to know why the hell we got to do this in the year of our Lord stuff. What happened to church and state? Anyways, moving on. In a lot of ways, this is even only focusing on the specifics of working in the legislature, but I think it'd be cool to see this bill get considered in a much more broad way about using volunteer work as a method for student loan forgiveness. This is a really good idea. It's a really good idea because I functionally think this is a great concept because it causes us to value labor over the dollar equation of that labor in our society more, right? So, like, if you're gonna be willing to forgive debt based off volunteer work, like, it's what you're recognizing is that there was positive contribution made to society in the process. So it's like, that's literally creating a social capital, which is like, and that's, I'm not against that, because that is much more like, that gets us closer to a merit-based system in my view, which would, I think a lot of people want to believe that we live in a merit-based system. I know that I grew up thinking we did, and I learned much later on that was not the case, and that's a big bummer. Like, crazy. But sorry, I realize that this is getting blocked off here. I want to make sure everybody can see the full text. This gets us closer to this concept of a merit-based society where with appropriate value placed on the act of labor, right? Like to put one's time and energy into transforming something into something better, through their contribution. That's a really good thing. So this is a really positive bill, and it would be a shame to see this go under. So something that might be worth doing. I mean, here in Hillsborough, we don't have any of our representatives currently sponsoring this bill. So it's something worth looking into and something worth asking about. If this is something that you feel like you might support, I highly recommend following through and reading up more on it. Again, it's House Bill 1268. And everything that I'm talking about here today, you can go and you can get it on legiscan.com, legiscan.com. And they have all of the New Hampshire bill texts in there, and it's sorted pretty well. So this is a good, quick way to just index all of that stuff. If you are wondering where you can get this kind of information, you're just not sure where to source it. There's quite a lot here. So so that's one of the bills I wanted to talk about. Okay, so this is a pretty classic, like, democratically partisan bill. It even says so right up top. It has no Republican co-sponsors. If we pop back over to the detail, I mean, we even have a Facebook comment here about wanting things for free. Again, I literally just went on a rant about how nothing's free, so this is a nonsense argument and laughable. And moving on from, this is good stuff, and this is the type of progressive policy that we should be, at the very least, this stuff needs to get dealt with, man. There's no reason we can't push this through, because it's not even a giveaway. This is if we can't even accept this little bit, then we're really, really, really just we're not helping ourselves, man. And if you want to get out of economic strife caused by a pandemic, might be a good idea to do any kind of debt relief that you possibly can in every single possible way that you can, including this. So, yeah, that's what I would have to say about that right there. I just, it's not, to me, it's a no-brainer. It's just something that we should be doing. And then, and that also, in contrast, all the arguments against it are just flat ridiculous. So, yeah. So that's 1268. I'm going to move on to a more Republican partisan bill. And this one's a bit fun, I guess, in the sense that it's going to be fun to talk about, because it's a really good example of how the tactic works. There's it's a solid representation. It's really just kind of barefaced, and we'll be able to get into this one a bit. So 1533 local, which is currently in a lay on table state, which is essentially we're going to let it hang out and we're not going to do anything. It is not the same as the previous bill that we just talked about, which inexpedient to legislate really puts it on the bottom of the stack and says we're basically never going to deal with this. Whereas lay on table says it's not of highest priority right now, but we will get to it when we get to it. It doesn't establish a hard date for it. It does leave the option to rescind on the part of the people who submitted it. But again, it's not like that's something can in theory lay on table indefinitely, but the idea that something like this wouldn't come back up is just yeah. And so, and I actually have some video that I can show with this one. I want to get into the actual text of this because this one's like wonky. So the analysis, this is sort of the top line, and you'll see this on every single one of these. This bill limits property tax increases for individuals 67 years of age or over, individuals eligible for Social Security benefits due to disability, and permanently and totally disabled veterans. Okay, so here's the thing about this, right? On the face, this bill looks like we want to tax less people who are disabled, veterans, and old folks. Sounds noble, right? So, something to consider, though, okay? The economic state of folks 67 years or older. There's accumulated wealth in this state, especially in older generations like this, and also in, you know, like you'll see like you'll also see a big concentration of wealth in like the like 45 to 65 bracket, like right in there. Like there's like a decent chunk of people that are earning like decent money, like over 80K, like in that neighborhood. You know what I mean? Now, something to keep in mind, per capita in New Hampshire, the income is $38,000, which is not even remotely like what's the word I want to be adequate. So like average is ridiculous when you realize per capita is 38K. So what that means is that we've got a bunch of really high earners, right? Really, really high earners, and likely those specific high earners are older. That's just, I mean, I don't think anybody is really like disillusioned at all about the idea that either the beneficiaries of this tax break, like vast majority of them, right? Because like I would probably say that there are more people over the age of 67 in the state than there are people eligible for disability and veterans, maybe even combined, or literally fit all three. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't help those people at all. I'm not saying you shouldn't help any people, but the point I want to get at here is that this would effectively make it so that some of the highest earners, this is yet another tax cut for the incredibly wealthy, disguised as a way to help veterans and people on Social Security because they're disabled. Now, like anybody who knows that the hoops you have to jump through in order to qualify for Social Security is like, they're pretty intense, right? And there's two kinds of Social Security. There's like the Social Security that's based off of your earnings, like the amount that you've contributed through taxes over the years that you then get paid back out at. So there's that. There's also just like need-based SSI, which you have to qualify for oftentimes because you're incredibly low income. There's a number of different situations, but essentially like, yeah, like you got to qualify for those things. That stuff is hard to qualify for. So it is a pretty limited pool of people that that fall into that category. So the main beneficiaries of this, the biggest group of people that would benefit from this particular bill passing, are just blanket people over the age of 67. Now, if we anticipate aging patterns, most of those, like the wealthiest subset of our state population, if not already in that bracket, is about to be in that age bracket. And it's a really, really, really slick tax dodge. Now, let me do this because I can pull up the video on it. There we go. Okay.
HB 1533 local,
Okay.
an act limiting the increase in property taxes for certain persons, having considered the same, report the same with the following resolution. Resolved that it is inexpedient to legislate. Representative Bruce Tatro for the committee. The chair recognizes Representative Roy to make a motion.
I'd like to move to table Bill 1533, please.
That motion is in order. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor signify by saying division vote has been requested. Members will please take their seats.
So just so we're clear here, one of the actual sponsors of the bill wants to lay it on table. He just wants to table it for the time being. So he's proposed this. And in a moment here, we're going to hear from another representative. Right now, they're calling the division vote.
The chair recognizes Representative Lay for parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, if I know that I share my colleagues' desire to continue to move things along, and Madam Speaker, if I know that we have had a whole class of these bills brought up this session and all have been defeated, would I not now support the motion to table by pressing the green button? Thank you.
The motion before the House is to table HB 1533. This is a division vote. If you're in favor.
So he's basically saying that they've squashed a number of these, so why would it bother him to just table it right now, basically to squash it later? Now, like, okay, that's fine. Or you should just squash it right now. It's cool. Whatever y'all want to do. I mean, like, I guess the people who wrote it are trying to table it, but like, let's be clear that it's a strategy, and if one were to think in a more like, oh geez, I don't want to put this, I guess, like, I guess it would be like a very surreptitious strategy on the part of conservatives at that particular moment in March to table things if they were perceiving that there could be a long-term shutdown that could affect elections, right? Which we're seeing right now. That's absolutely happening. Now, if this affects elections, what's to say that there couldn't be some sort of opportunity to flip the House or the Senate in the state of New Hampshire? We all know that when voters turnout is suppressed, that conservatives tend to win elections. That's just a true thing because of the constituencies that show up for stuff like that. So if if we're not wise to the fact that some, like, a very, very, very intelligent political strategist would suggest that it's smart to take some of this stuff and table it now and hold off and really de-emphasize it, take the pressure off, knowing that a pandemic could completely upend the political system and create a new opportunity to get through later. So it's like, don't take the bait. You know what I mean? Like, not that it's obviously too late now, but it's a lesson to be learned for, you know, the left in this state that, or could be that you deal with it when you can, nip it at the bud. Don't wait until later. I know this was an incredibly intense session. This particular moment happened at 12:43 a.m. So it's like almost 1 o'clock. They've been going for a really long time. So I get it. You know, I do understand the intensity of this situation. Also, this is the job. And if we have a problem with that, then we need to maybe consider, like, why do we have a problem with sending people to do this for such little pay or put at such risk or whatever? Like, those are separate issues that need to be addressed. Okay. That's not like, that's independent. And I think, you know, I think it's, don't underestimate your opponent in this type of situation and see that long term, I guess, like, play the long game on it, you know? Don't let it be a game of checkers. So that, you know, I think those two really do a good job of expressing sort of the weird inner workings of political dichotomy in the state right now. And I like looking at that kind of stuff and just thinking about it in terms of, you know, how, like, yeah, it's just going on and it's happening, but, like, in what ways does it represent the consistent undertones of, like, the like, how do each of these little pieces play a role in this broader weird narrative that we somehow disconnect from, like, actual policy and, like, day-to-day procedure and, like, electoral politics? Or, like, why make that separation? What good does it do us? And is it actually hurting our understanding of things? Are we misunderstanding our own politics because we don't consider issues outside of the vacuums that make us feel comfortable? So at any rate, final thing I wanted to talk about was, and this actually, I should have remembered that I didn't get notes for this one, because I pulled it up this morning because I saw it and I was like, oh, this is perfect. This is exactly the type of thing that I would like to talk about. Anybody who knows me knows that I am passionate about marijuana legalization, and anything that's pro just getting that more available and more legal in our society. I think on the whole, if you're going to compare marijuana to alcohol, marijuana wins every time, just in terms of, like, there are myriad reasons why it's just in my opinion, a preferential alternative, whether you're smoking it or you're eating it or you're drinking it or you're putting it in lotion or, like, what, I don't care. Right. So New Hampshire has been consistently asinine when it comes to dealing with this, right? We've decriminalized in the state, right? It's now no longer a misdemeanor to, like, have any on you, which sucks, let me tell you, from experience, that's nonsense. So we've decriminalized it now. You get, like, a ticket. It's like, you know, it's not really a big deal. But it's not, you know, we're not at that kind of, like, legalization point that our neighboring states are. And a piece of legislation that is currently engrossed in the House, House Bill 1648 FN, an act relative to the home cultivation of cannabis plants and the possession of certain cannabis-infused products. We'll pop this over. The analysis of the bill says this bill permits adults to possess up to 3/4 of an ounce of cannabis, 5 grams of hashish, and certain cannabis-infused products. Permits adults to cultivate up to 6 plants at home in a secure location that is not visible from other properties, and to possess and process the cannabis produced from their plants at the same location. Permits adults to give cannabis to other adults, provided it is not more than 3/4 of an ounce of cannabis, 5 grams of hashish, or up to 300 milligrams of cannabis-infused products, or 3 immature plants. Provides that smoking or vaporizing cannabis in public by an adult would be punishable by a $100 fine. Provides violations of the restrictions on cultivation would be a violation punishable by fine up to $750. Penalizes dangerous, volatile extraction, and permits adults to possess, make and sell cannabis accessories to other adults. They say in here that it's okay to give it. It's not let's see here. Yeah, permits adults to give cannabis to other adults, provided it is not more than 3/4 of an ounce. So they're not allowing you to sell cannabis. They're talking about it's okay to sell anything like accessories, anything like that. You can sell that, but you can't actually sell it. So this isn't, we're not talking about we're not necessarily talking here about legalizing and taxing, right? What we're talking about right here is we're saying we're not going to go after you for growing it at home, right? Now, this bill we've got 8 sponsors on it. Says slightly partisan, 5 Democrat, 3 Republican, right? So, but this is kind of cool that it's like, this is good. Now, it's very much so like focused on the individual's right to do what they want on their property. They talk about, they do basically go in depth that it's an age limit of 21. If you're under that, all of the same previous possession laws do still sort of apply to that. So if you're a minor, you got to keep that in mind. It follows the same original statutes as anything else. They do a pretty decent job defining things here. They're changing marijuana to cannabis. Seems like a pretty reasonable adjustment. Here they're getting into possession limits. They're basically saying in here that you can have more than the limit as long as it's stored at the same location in which it's being grown. This is they talk about transferring. They say a transfer for remuneration if cannabis is given away contemporaneously with another transaction between the same parties. If a gift of cannabis is offered or advertised in conjunction with an offer for sale of goods, or if the gift of cannabis is contingent upon a separate transaction of goods and services. So they basically sort of explain that, like, you can't just have it out in the open. You can't be growing it on your landlord's property. They have a right to say you can't do that. So here we go. This is Section 8 is sort of something that I think nothing in this section shall be construed to require an employer to permit or accommodate yada 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 of cannabis in the workforce or to affect the ability. So like basically like they still like this doesn't have anything to do with an employer's right to say screw off if you're using or getting near it. It doesn't have anything to do with whether or not you're inebriated and you're driving. Obviously, you're not allowed to give it to minors, whether sold or not. You know, allowing anybody to it's basically saying like anybody that owns or a property or a business or anything like that has every right to say this is my domain and you can't do that. So just because the state says so doesn't mean that they can't make their own rules, and that's what this section's basically getting at. This is a good bill, man. It's a great bill. And it's awesome that it's engrossed. And right now, it's in the Senate Judiciary Committee. Now, what does that mean? Well, let's talk about the Senate Judiciary Committee. Okay, so this is their webpage on the Senate. So talk about this is stuff that they've already been through, stuff that they obviously they haven't gotten to this one yet. But at the very top, it tells us who's on this committee, right? Now, it's chaired by Martha Hennessy, who's a Democrat. Vice Chair Shannon Shanley, she's also a Democrat. And then on the committee as well, you've got Melanie Levesque D, Harold Finch R, and Sharon Carson R. Okay, so right now we already know that this board essentially, like this committee, is like we're leaning Democratic already. So there's sort of just that inherent thing built into it. So what I then wanted to do is I want to go and look at their what does the state have to say about their specific records on or their positions on marijuana. So let's get into it. So here we have Shannon Shanley. Actually, we will start at the top. Okay, so Martha Hennessy, who is the chair. If we scroll down to crime and public safety and we look at should New Hampshire decriminalize small amounts of marijuana, she says she is for. Should New Hampshire legalize the recreational use of marijuana, she is for. She says, I support marijuana legalization. Okay, cool. So that's one vote for this, right? In theory. We can then move on to, we'll do Melanie Levesque after that. She is also for decriminalization. She has not responded to the legalization question. This candidate has not provided a position on the issue. Each election year, we send a survey on key issues to every candidate in the state office. We make every effort to reach each candidate by phone, email, and snail mail. We also search for positions from other sources if you have any information. So if anybody knows where she sits on that, it would be cool to get it into in a citizens count. But one could generally presume that she'd probably lean towards being all right with this, especially because this isn't a full-on legalization and taxation. It's just letting people do something in their own house or their own property, and it does keep it sort of contained, and it falls more or less within the same decriminalization stuff that we've already got going on. It's really not that outrageous, and 3/4 of an ounce is pretty, that's a pretty low limit. I mean, I know other states they don't start kicking it until an ounce, so we're a little stricter in that sense already. I've met Melanie Levesque. She's really nice. She's a solid person. It seems like she's very willing to listen. If you want to have a decent conversation about an issue with her. So I would absolutely, consider this a positive vote for it. Let's see here. We'll get into some of the more. We've got Sharon Carson. We'll look at the conservatives. Okay, so Sharon Carson. She's against decriminalizing small amounts of marijuana. So no response on legalizing, but one could extrapolate that she probably would not be for this in any kind of way. Yeah, not great. But that's 2 against 1, or 2 for 1 against. Okay, we're fine with that. I mean, move forward. So what does Harold French have to say? Here we are. Harold French, Republican. And he is actually for the decriminalization of small amounts of marijuana and voted so. So he's actually got a voting record pro this. He isn't necessarily for legalizing, probably because, if I had to guess, he's probably taking a more non-interventional government approach here and doesn't want to say don't do something, or doesn't want to tell everybody what they can or can't do, just wants to not restrict things as much as possible, and to take the criminalization off the records. But I would imagine that if he's actually voted in that way for 640, that he would probably be chill on this. So we're already looking good in that sense. Although there's still some question. There's wiggle room on this. There's no, it's not an ought to pass. Okay, we'll say that there's just as much likelihood that this could not work as it could. So let's look at that final vote. So we've got Shannon Shanley, who, if we just swing back over, she is our vice chair on the committee. And she is against the recreational use by voting record. She voted against legalizing and taxing marijuana. So that's a Democratic vote that's not pro this particular legalization. Now she has been for the decriminalization but doesn't want to legalize it. So this is that kind of middle ground, and this is the type of thing this is where, and I'm not saying that she's necessarily going to be the one to do it, but what I'm saying is that this sort of cocktail of weird, well, I'm kind of for it, but I'm kind of against it too, on almost every single one of their parts, aside from the chair of the freaking board and the Republican who was just nope, straight up. There's no wishy-washiness on those areas, but for everybody else there really is, and it's there's almost no good reason as to why. There's no, I don't know what we get out of it, and that is exactly why New Hampshire is stuck so far in the damn past on this stuff, while other states around us are just blowing past us, and we just can't deal with it. I don't know why we can't just get this particular freedom through. Dude, we're talking about growing 6 plants 6 damn plants in your house or your backyard where nobody can see them. Shit, it even says, now I'm just swearing, but it even says that, with the exclusion of yeah, if you can see it with binoculars, okay, you can't complain about it. But if it's hidden from plain sight and you've done the prima facie measures to protect visibility and people breaking into it or whatever, it's good. Now, like, I don't know why we can't just accept that. Like, that's what we do in this state already anyways. So that one's a little bit nonsensical to me. And I really, really hope that, you know, for a number of reasons, I hope that these people can all figure out a way to get the hell back to work. Like, for real, please, before like anything goes super more sideways, like this is an elected position, it's a job, please do it. Get this stuff through and deal with it. Get the stuff that's going to be bad off the table. Get the stuff that's going to help us moving back through. If you pulled the pin out of it, shove it back in or rewrite it and get it back out in the loop so that we can help younger people who are trying to get out of debt, so that we can help people who are struggling through this period of time, who are looking to source things more locally, who understand that they are going to need to find ways to self-medicate through this process that will likely last an 18-month period or more. So like, dude, this is ridiculous. There's no reason to not just get on top of this. And I think one of the biggest takeaways that I look at when I just hop over to these sites and I have them, you know, a period of time where I'm reading through stuff is, you know what? They need to figure out a way to get back to work. Our elected officials need to get back in it. And I would like to hear more about that. So, maybe that's where we'll go on some episodes coming up in the future. As for today, that's about all that I can do. I've actually gone about 15 minutes over the line that I was like, I'm exhausted from this and I just got to scoot on out of here. But I just, you know, huge thanks to anybody who's tuning into this. You know, it's always just really nice to do this, and I've been really, you know, appreciative of all of the good feedback that we've been getting for this stuff. So at any rate, yeah, thanks so much. Let's see, next week slated to have on Josie Pinto from the New Hampshire Youth Movement. So anybody, it's going to be one of the first interviews that we've done. We were going to originally do it this week, but we had something come up. We just weren't able to make it happen. So I figured I'd take some time to talk about legislation, and hopefully we'll do some more of that next week too, and talk about directions that activist organizations that are trying to push progressive legislation, positive things to help communities, especially in the time of COVID-19 when we're dealing with economic collapse surrounding us everywhere. How do we get through this, and how do we have better, more holistically ground up constructed communities that are going to serve us well in a time where we can't really rely on some of these broader global supply chains or networks or governments or systems. So that's going to be a really fun conversation. We're going to keep it pretty New Hampshire focused. And yeah, so that's where we're at. It's been great doing the show. Again, take a minute to follow us on Twitter, support us on Patreon. You can catch up on some of our back material there. You can hop down in the description, subscribe right over here, hit the bell for the notifications. I will try and get the links up in the description as soon as I possibly can. I know I've been slacking on that a lot lately, so it's I got to get it together. It's been tough, but thanks folks so much. We'll be back. We'll keep doing this. It's been great. And just, take care. Everybody have a really awesome week, and look forward to seeing everybody next time.
It's been a revelation. Maybe reveal something to someone else through the music. Something that's good, and something that they feel that maybe enriches their life a little bit, or makes them feel better as a person, or something like that.